Let me take you back to when I moved into what was supposed to be our dream neighborhood. A suburban paradise nestled at the edge of the hills, with tree-lined streets, white picket fences, and the illusion of peace. My wife Laura and I had been saving for years to finally afford a place we could grow old in. A 4-bedroom ranch-style house with a wide yard and an even wider sky above it. Perfect for one thing: solar panels. See, I'm not just your average homeowner. I'm an electrical engineer by trade and a bit of a sustainability nut by passion. I've spent 2 decades helping companies optimize their renewable energy systems. So when it came time to outfit our house, I went all in. High-efficiency solar panels, Tesla Powerwalls, smart inverters, the works. We were almost entirely off-grid by the end of the first month. Our energy bill? Practically zero. And it was glorious until the HOA came knocking. Now, when I first moved in, I did my due diligence. I read the HOA bylaws, looked up state laws on solar access, and even reached out to the HOA president, a smug, tight-lipped man named Craig Delaney. He gave me the standard brush-off. As long as it's not visible from the street, we don't care. That was good enough for me. My panels were set up on the back-facing roof and the backyard pergola, completely hidden from public view. But one morning, about 3 months after installation, I walked outside and nearly choked on my coffee. My panels, gone. Not moved, not damaged, not vandalized. Just gone. Like they'd never been there. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe a contractor had gotten the wrong house. Maybe there was a fire hazard or something. But when I checked my security cams, my jaw hit the floor. There they were. 2 HOA board members and a third guy in a reflective vest, cutting and hauling away my solar panels in broad daylight. They'd even brought a truck. I lost it. I stormed down to the HOA office, which was this overly modern building near the clubhouse with tinted windows and a fountain out front that probably cost more than my first car. Craig Delaney was in a meeting, they said. No one would talk to me. When he finally came out, he gave me this smug little smile and said, "They violated HOA aesthetics policy. You'll get a letter." Aesthetics? Are you kidding me? I demanded documentation. Pictures, citations, complaints, anything. Craig handed me a packet stapled at the corner. It was a notice, backdated, saying the panels were in violation due to visible reflectivity and unapproved structures. It had supposedly been mailed weeks ago. But my mailbox? Empty. Now here's the thing. I'm not the type to yell. I don't throw punches or make idle threats. I build things, systems, plans. Revenge isn't just sweet, it's calculated. So while Craig and the HOA were celebrating their little power trip, I went to work. First, I started documenting everything: dates, times, footage, emails. Then I talked to my attorney, who almost spit out his coffee laughing. Turns out, under state law, HOAs can't ban solar panels. There are protections in place, and even if they could enforce certain appearance restrictions, they're required to notify the homeowner in writing and allow time to respond. None of that happened. I could have taken them straight to court, and believe me, I would. But I had something bigger in mind. Something that would make Craig and his cronies remember my name every time they flicked a light switch. I started digging into the HOA's infrastructure. Their building, like the rest of the neighborhood, was designed on a shared utility grid. But unlike most homes, the office didn't have backup systems. No generator. No battery storage, and they were on the same power circuit as the clubhouse, the tennis courts, and the community pool. I smiled. It took me 2 weeks to put the plan in motion. I used my own connections, folks in solar installation, electrical inspection, and utility coordination, to figure out exactly how their system worked. I didn't do anything illegal. Not yet, anyway. I just filed a few notices, contacted the power company about grid overage, and let them know my panels were unlawfully removed, thus causing a localized imbalance in the grid allocation. The response? Predictable. The power company flagged the HOA office for inspection. And in the meantime, they had to shut off the power to prevent any potential overdraw. You ever seen HOA board members sweating through a meeting in a 90-degree room with no AC and no lights? I have. And it was glorious. Craig called me that afternoon, furious, said I'd made a big mistake. I calmly told him I was just reporting a power fluctuation from a now unbalanced microgrid which they caused. I added that I'd be submitting an invoice for my destroyed solar panels, which totaled over $30,000. If they didn't pay, I'd file a civil suit. And the media? Oh, I'd already contacted a few local reporters. He hung up. But the best was yet to come, because you don't just mess with an engineer who knows how the grid works. You don't rip solar off someone's roof and expect to walk away unscathed. Not when that someone has the knowledge and the time to bring down your entire operation. And I was just getting started. The next day, Craig and the board tried to strike back. I could feel their desperation creeping in. Flyers were dropped off at every house in the neighborhood, printed in glaring red ink. Unstable electrical systems in the neighborhood caused by unauthorized solar installations. They didn't name me directly, but the implication was obvious. It was laughable. Unauthorized? I had permits, documents, contractor receipts, and a green stamp from the county building office. And Craig knew it. But this wasn't about legality. It was about control. They even hosted an emergency community meeting in the now-dark clubhouse. The irony was delicious. With no electricity, they used camping lanterns and handouts. I showed up just to make a point, and the look on Craig's face when I sat in the front row was priceless. Due to recent events, Craig said, wiping sweat off his forehead, we're investigating the impact of individual power systems on community safety. I raised my hand. Are you referring to the solar panels you illegally removed from my property, which led to the power imbalance you're now blaming me for? Murmurs rippled across the room. People turned and stared. A few even whispered things like, "Wait, that was you? And you had panels?" Craig stuttered, then mumbled something about protocol and aesthetics. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted in the neighborhood. After the meeting, I got stopped by a couple neighbors in the parking lot. One of them, Dan, an old Army vet who'd lived there for 15 years, patted me on the back. "Good on you for fighting back," he said. "They fined me last year for painting my door navy instead of slate blue." Another woman, Sherry, told me she'd been trying to install a wheelchair ramp for her husband but was blocked by the HOA 3 times. It was like I'd opened a floodgate. People were angry, but until now, no one had pushed back hard enough to make it matter. So I decided to become that guy. I started hosting informal homeowner coffee chats in my garage. Nothing official, just folks getting together to talk about their frustrations. And man, did the stories pour out. Illegal fines, ignored maintenance requests, secret meetings, threats of liens over petty issues. One guy even said the HOA tried to seize his lawn furniture over an unauthorized patio layout. These weren't just inconveniences, they were abuses of power. And as the list grew longer, my resolve hardened. I filed the lawsuit. It was a clean, surgical legal move. Nothing wild, just a well-documented tort claim for damages to personal property, lost utility benefits, and emotional distress. My lawyer, an absolute beast named Carmen, who hated HOAs with the fury of 1,000 suns, helped me draft it perfectly. We served them on a Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, Craig had called for a closed-door board session, and by Thursday, they were in full panic mode. Their insurance carrier sent a representative to try and settle, but I wasn't having it. I want every dollar, I told them, and I want it in writing that the HOA will never interfere with renewable energy installations again. But even as they scrambled behind the scenes, Craig wasn't done. He still thought he could outmaneuver me. About a week later, my mailbox filled up again, only this time with letters from the Architectural Compliance Committee. They were citing me for weeds in the backyard. I had none. Failure to trim an unauthorized hedge, it was rosemary, and excessive nighttime lighting from my garden path. Petty. So petty it was laughable. But here's the thing. Every one of those citations was delivered past deadline. Under HOA rules, they had to give homeowners 14 days to correct an issue. They were delivering notices marked with dates from 2 weeks ago, like I wouldn't notice. So I compiled them all and added it to the lawsuit. Then I filed a complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. Normally they're slow, but I included video footage, audio recordings, and scanned timestamps showing the backdated notices. That got their attention. While that storm was brewing, I moved to phase 2 of my plan, hitting them where it really hurt, their power. See, the HOA office, the clubhouse, and several auxiliary buildings all ran off a shared transformer that the HOA maintained through a private service agreement with the utility company. That meant they were responsible for any structural changes, upgrades, or issues with the wiring on their side of the meter. So I submitted a public records request to the county and got the blueprints. Guess what I found? That transformer was over 30 years old, way past its rated life, and had a history of outages. Worse, the HOA had been using a local contractor with no proper certifications to repair it on the cheap. So I made one anonymous call to the State Electrical Safety Board. 2 weeks later, the inspector showed up. And wouldn't you know it, the transformer failed the inspection. Badly. They had to shut it down pending an overhaul, which would take at least a month. The HOA couldn't even get a temporary permit to run a generator because the entire building wasn't zoned for backup power. In one stroke, I had the whole HOA office rendered dark, hot, and useless. They couldn't run meetings, couldn't send emails, couldn't even open the electric gate to the parking lot without manual overrides. And every time a board member looked out their front window, what did they see? My house, fully lit, fully powered, peaceful, silent, and basking in the warm, guilt-free glow of clean solar energy. Craig finally called again. This time, his voice was thin and cracked. "What do you want?" he asked. "You've made your point." I smiled. "I want the HOA to reimburse me for the full cost of my panels. I want a public apology, delivered in writing, posted in your newsletter and website. I want every homeowner who's been wronged by your board to have a fair hearing. And I want your resignation." Silence. Then, "You'll hear from our lawyer." "Looking forward to it," I said and hung up. But I wasn't waiting. The best was yet to come. Because remember all those coffee chats in my garage? They had evolved. We had signatures, we had stories, we had numbers. We were about to turn the HOA upside down. I didn't even have to push. At the next coffee chat, now promoted to a full-blown town hall in Dan's 3-car garage, we packed in more than 50 homeowners. Lawn chairs, folding tables, a couple of coolers full of sodas and cheap beer. Grassroots politics at its finest. Carmen, my lawyer, showed up with a portable projector and splashed an Excel sheet across a bed sheet taped to the wall. Every row was an incident. Capricious fines, lien threats, denial of disability ramps, petty paint shade disputes. Dollar totals glowed in a column on the right, and when the sum at the bottom passed 6 figures, a collective gasp filled the room. That, Carmen said, pointing, is potential class action territory. Murmurs rose, equal parts anger and exhilaration. A short woman at the back, Marie, owner of the unauthorized patio furniture, stood up and said what we were all thinking. How do we get rid of them? I clicked to the next slide. Recall process and special election. Our bylaws allowed the board to be recalled with signatures from 33% of the membership. We were already at 24% from people in that garage alone. Dan pulled out a stack of blank petitions, and Sharpies flashed like sabers. By midnight, we were fanning across the cul-de-sacs in pairs, knocking on doors. The blackout at the office had actually done us a favor. Residents were home, cranky, and ready to vent. Some people needed coaxing, others yanked pens from our hands before we'd finished the pitch. I'll never forget Mrs. Kaplan, 82, always in a pink visor, shaken with fury as she scribbled her name. They fined me for keeping birdseed on the porch, said it encouraged pests. My late husband loved cardinals. Those men have no souls. We hit the threshold in 48 hours. Craig tried to slow roll the inevitable. The board issued an urgent notice claiming our petitions were invalid because the HOA's seal hadn't been embossed on each sheet. Nice try. Carmen fired back a cease and desist and reminded them that the same transformer shutdown, keeping their lights off, also prevented access to the embossing machine. If they wanted a stamp, they'd have to restore power, something their insurer now forbade until the wiring was replaced. Checkmate. The county clerk scheduled the recall election for 4 weeks out, and the neighborhood caught campaign fever. Sidewalk chalk arrows pointed to pop-up info booths. Teens live-streamed candidates' Q&As from picnic tables. Someone designed Craig Must Craig memes, photoshopping his tight smile onto disgraced celebrities, and they spread faster than dandelions after rain. We fielded a slate we called the Clean Grid 5. Dan the vet, Sherry the caregiver, Marie the patio furniture rebel, a software architect named Priya who handled our website, and, at their insistence, me. I hadn't planned on running, but when 30 neighbors chanted my name outside the darkened clubhouse, I caved. Craig's faction countered with the status quo coalition. Their flyers promised order, tradition, and property values. But without electricity for printers, they had to use a copy shop downtown, and half the neighborhood mockingly recycled the glossy handouts into paper airplanes. Meanwhile, my civil lawsuit marched on. Discovery revealed emails between Craig and the repair contractor bragging about stripping my panels for resale. They hadn't destroyed them, they'd sold them to a flipper 2 counties over. That turned a property damage claim into felony theft. The moment Carmen filed an amended complaint, Craig's personal attorney detached from the HOA council and begged for a private meeting. We met at a diner off the interstate. Craig looked 10 years older. Unkempt hair, sunburned cheeks from days without office AC. He slid into the booth and blurted, "Name your price." I slid a manila folder across the formica. "Full restitution to me. Drop every outstanding citation issued this year. Resign effective immediately. And you write a formal letter supporting our solar access amendment." He skimmed the paper, face twitching. That amendment would strip the Board of Architectural veto power. "Exactly," I said, sipping coffee. "Oh, and I want the HOA to fund a community solar array on the clubhouse roof once it's rewired. Consider it restorative justice." Craig's jaw clenched. "Impossible." "Then we'll see you in criminal court," Carmen said, leaning forward. "The DA's office expects our evidence package tomorrow." Craig swallowed. "I need time. You have until the election. After that, we negotiate with whoever's left standing." Word of Craig's secret meeting leaked within hours. Someone spotted his sports car at the diner and posted it to the neighborhood forum. That torpedoed whatever authority he had left. By the final week, the only people attending status quo rallies were board members' spouses and the contractor who'd pocketed my panels. He lingered at the snack table like a vulture, maybe hoping for a pardon. Election day dawned bright and brutally hot. Perfect symbolism. The polling tents were set up on the clubhouse lawn, power cables trailing to a rented generator humming like a bee with a hangover. Residents queued before breakfast, fanning their ballots with HOA newsletters printed on Craig's watch, each one a reminder of past grievances. When the clerk announced turnout had smashed the previous record by 300%, Craig knew it was over. He didn't even stay for the count. A neighbor saw him drive away with boxes strapped to his roof rack, his own belongings from the powerless office. At sunset, the results hit the bulletin board. Clean Grid 5 swept every seat by a landslide. Fireworks, literal fireworks, erupted from Dan's driveway. Turns out he had a stash of legal fountains from a trip to Nevada. Kids chased sparklers under the dark clubhouse silhouette, and for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt alive. But victory was only halftime. We still had to dismantle years of bureaucratic booby traps and bring power, literal and figurative, back to the people. Our first board meeting, held on folding chairs in Sherry's living room, opened with Carmen's summary of the forensic audit. Craig's regime had siphoned reserve funds into administrative enhancements, overpriced landscaping at their own cul-de-sac, custom mahogany desks, even a line item for a decorative fountain filtration upgrade that never happened. The reserves were dangerously low. One major roof leak in the clubhouse and we'd be bankrupt. "Good thing we're installing solar," Marie quipped, scrolling through cost-benefit spreadsheets. "The first-year savings on utility bills covers half the deficit." Priya unveiled a new community portal where every invoice, vote, and maintenance log would be public. Transparency wasn't just a buzzword. It was a firewall against future tyrants. Dan tackled the transformer fiasco. He negotiated with the utility for a modern microgrid setup, transformer upgrade, battery backup, and yes, my stolen solar panels, which the flipper relinquished after a nudge from the sheriff's office. Watching those panels hoisted onto the clubhouse roof felt like reclaiming stolen history. Sherry spearheaded a peace treaty initiative. Any homeowner fined under Craig's bogus citations could apply for reimbursement or forgiveness. We processed 50 applications the first week. each one ending with a handshake or sometimes a grateful hug across Sherry's dining table. Craig, for his part, tried a last-ditch gambit. He filed a wrongful recall suit claiming procedural errors. The presiding judge tossed it in minutes, citing the transformer blackout as self-inflicted operational negligence. Carmen walked out of court whistling. Then came the pièce de résistance. At our first annual meeting under the new board, we presented a motion to amend the bylaws. No future HOA board may prohibit, restrict, or financially burden any homeowner from installing renewable energy systems provided basic safety codes are met. The vote tally? Unanimous. Even former status quo supporters raised their hands. The blackout had taught them the value of independent power. After the motion passed, I stepped to the mic, heart pounding. I once believed revenge was about payback, I told the crowd, but real revenge, lasting revenge, is building something better in the rubble left by bullies. Applause thundered. Someone started chanting, "Light it up! Light it up!" We'd invited the mayor and a local news crew for the ceremonial flip of the switch. When Dan pressed the oversized green button, the clubhouse exterior glowed. Pathway lamps sparked alive, and string lights zigzagged over the lawn. The entire system drew first from the panels, then batteries, then the grid as backup, a reverse of the old hierarchy. Kids shrieked as music burst from outdoor speakers. Food trucks, booked by Priya, pulled up, engines purring, lights blazing. The night transformed into a block party none of us would forget. I walked to the edge of the crowd and looked back at our house, panels gleaming under the moonlight, and felt something settle inside me. Not smugness, not even relief. Purpose. The recognition that one stubborn engineer, plus a community that finally believed in itself, could turn darkness into light. But every story has loose ends. Craig still faced criminal charges, and the contractor was cooperating to shave his own sentence. Insurance adjusters swarmed, lawyers drafted settlements, and subpoenas flew. Yet that chaos felt distant, muted by the hum of new inverters and the laughter of neighbors grilling under solar-powered lamps. Still, there was one final move on my board. A strategic checkmate I'd been saving. Remember the shared power circuit that linked the office, pool, and tennis courts? Under the new microgrid, we could program demand response events, brief scheduled cutoffs during peak rates, shifting load to the batteries. It saved us money and fed excess power back to the utility. For a credit, at our second monthly meeting, we voted to split those credits equally among all homeowners, automatically deducted from dues. For the first time in HOA history, compliance literally paid dividends. Sherry's husband, leaning on his new ramp, laughed. "So the board that once robbed us is now giving us kickbacks?" "Call it poetic justice," I said. Late that summer, as cicadas droned in the magnolias, Craig's trial finally began. I sat in the gallery beside Dan and Marie. Carmen presented the timeline: the unauthorized removal, the resale, the transformer neglect. The prosecutor added a count of fraud for faking compliance certificates. Craig's defense wilted under recorded emails and security cam footage. The jury needed less than 2 hours. Craig received 18 months in county lockup plus restitution. The contractor got probation and a hefty fine. The court ordered Craig to sign a formal public apology drafted by Carmen, confessing to willful violation of homeowner rights and environmental vandalism. We framed a copy in the clubhouse foyer, right under a plaque listing the Clean Grid 5. I never saw Craig again, But sometimes, when a perfect breeze spins the rooftop turbine, we added in phase 2 of the rebuild. I imagine him somewhere hearing about our net positive energy reports and grinding his teeth. By fall, the neighborhood looked different. Roofs sprouted gleaming panels, xeriscaped lawns replaced turf, rain barrels lined side yards like fat blue guard dogs. The HOA newsletter, now a weekly email blast, featured energy savings tips and DIY solar Saturdays hosted by yours truly. Kids painted murals on the transformer housing, swirling suns, lightning bolts, and in one corner, a cartoon Craig chased by an angry light bulb. One crisp October evening, Laura and I sat on our back porch, sipping iced tea under an Edison bulb string powered entirely by our reclaimed pergola array. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know," she said, "when they ripped those panels out, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen." I kissed her hair. "Turns out it was the spark we needed." She smiled. "Think the universe will ever run out of bullies for you to out-engineer?" The courtroom was as chilly as Craig's demeanor had once been smug. As he sat at the defense table, his posture hunched and suit disheveled, it was hard to reconcile him with the overconfident man who once barked orders from the HOA office like a corporate tyrant. He avoided looking our way, but I could tell from the tremor in his hand as he reached for his water glass. He felt it, the weight of the truth, the consequences. Carmen opened with the story of the stolen solar panels, how they'd been ripped from a homeowner's property without notice, sold off for profit, and replaced with a citation and a power outage. She wove it seamlessly into the larger narrative. Years of abusive authority, targeted fines, misappropriation of funds, and the use of HOA power as a personal weapon rather than a tool for communal benefit. The DA's office had added charges, not just theft, but wire fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. The emails we'd unearthed showed Craig and the contractor agreeing to bill extra for damages that never occurred, referring to fake lightning strikes and made-up repairs. Worse, they had submitted claims to the HOA's insurance under false pretenses. His attorney tried to pivot, claimed Craig was overwhelmed and misguided rather than malicious. But the jury wasn't buying it. Not after Carmen played a voicemail Craig had left the contractor, laughing about how much those tree huggers would pay to get their precious panels back. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I made a short statement. This case was never just about one man. It was about what happens when people stop paying attention to who holds the power. We didn't just fix a board, we fixed a system. A week later, the verdict came in. Guilty on all major counts. Craig was sentenced to 6 years in state prison, with restitution payments to be made from the sale of his personal assets. The contractor cut a deal, probation in exchange for testifying against 2 other former board members who'd signed off on fraudulent contracts. The HOA world took notice. News articles ran titles like "The Solar Rebellion" and "How One Homeowner Took Down an Entire Corrupt HOA." A few even romanticized it. David versus Goliath, with a circuit breaker. But the real victory wasn't in headlines. It was in what came next. We got to work. The clubhouse was restored, rewired, and repurposed. Instead of a command center for the board, we turned it into a true community hub. Kids took art classes in the renovated multi-purpose room. Retirees organized chess tournaments on Saturday mornings, and on the second Tuesday of every month, we held open HOA meetings, live-streamed for transparency, with Q&A sessions that anyone could join via Zoom. We also partnered with a nonprofit to expand solar access for lower-income homeowners in nearby areas. Our neighborhood became a pilot program for decentralized energy management. With Priya's help, we created a resident dashboard showing not just HOA budgets but also energy savings, carbon offsets, and maintenance schedules. What had started as revenge had evolved into revolution. The HOA wasn't just reformed, it was reborn. One evening, months later, I found myself standing on the edge of my property, staring up at the now restored solar panels. The sun was dipping behind the hills, bathing everything in gold. A soft breeze rustled the newly planted pollinator garden in our front yard, another project spearheaded by Marie. Dan walked over, a beer in each hand, and handed me one. "You did good," he said. "We did good," I corrected. He chuckled. "You ever think of running for city council?" "God, no," I said, laughing. "I've had enough power struggles for a lifetime." But as we stood there, watching the lights flick on across the neighborhood, not with fear or fines, but with energy we'd produced ourselves, it was clear. We'd proven something. That justice doesn't always come with handcuffs. Sometimes it comes with hard hats, blueprints, and the guts to flip a switch when no one else will. The final piece of poetic justice came courtesy of Sherry. At our next board meeting, she presented a motion to name the clubhouse solar array after Craig, officially designating it the Craig J. Morrison Renewable Learning Center. A few members gasped. Was this irony or a joke? Sherry smiled. So no one ever forgets who showed us what not to be. The vote passed unanimously, and with that, the story of a stolen solar panel ended with a shining beacon, powered by sunlight, protected by truth, and funded by the very fines that once tried to extinguish our independence. We didn't just take down an HOA tyrant. We flipped the entire power grid, literally and figuratively, and will never be in the dark again. The transformation in the neighborhood wasn't instant, but it was unmistakable. The same streets that once felt patrolled and policed now felt peaceful. Instead of scowls from clipboard-wielding volunteers enforcing mulch depth and mailbox uniformity, people now waved to each other from their driveways. Kids chalked hopscotch squares on the sidewalks without fear of violating aesthetic policy. The fog of fear that had loomed over the community had finally lifted, and there was a deeper shift beneath the surface. People had begun to care again. Not about rules and fines, but about each other. Residents started organizing potlucks, park cleanups, and tool-sharing programs. A neighbor named Julio, a retired electrician, hosted weekend workshops on how to install solar panels safely. Another neighbor offered free lawnmower tune-ups in her garage. People who once avoided each other for fear of being reported now borrowed eggs and offered to water plants when someone went out of town. Power had returned to the people, literally and figuratively. The new HOA board, composed of myself, Sherry, Dan, and 3 others, elected by overwhelming majority, wasted no time passing new bylaws. 1. No alteration of private property without homeowner consent. 2. All board finances must be publicly posted monthly with receipts. 3. All energy initiatives require a 2/3 community vote to proceed. 4. All complaints must go through a neutral ombudsperson to avoid targeting or harassment. These rules weren't designed to control, they were built to protect. But the story wasn't over yet. Remember that class action Carmen had mentioned during the trial? Well, it turned out that what Craig had done in our community wasn't unique. Through her firm's investigation, she discovered that the same solar contractor had signed nearly identical deals with 5 other HOA boards across the state. Some had the panels ripped out, others had them declared unsafe after mysterious inspections, followed by removal and resale. The scam had been lucrative until now. Carmen filed a sweeping class action lawsuit against the contractor, naming Craig and 2 other former board members as co-defendants. She partnered with the state attorney general, and within months, subpoenas were flying like confetti at a parade. Depositions revealed a network of shady deals, off-the-books payments, and even one HOA president who'd accepted free landscaping and a cruise vacation in exchange for a removal contract. The class action caught the attention of national media. Headlines blared: "Sunlight Scandal," "Solar Scam," "Sweeps Suburbs," "HOA Corruption Goes Statewide," "Homeowners Revolt Against Green Energy Grift." Suddenly, my little fight over a backyard power source had become part of a much bigger movement. A Senate subcommittee even reached out. They wanted me to testify in Washington about the need for federal protections for solar panel owners in HOA-governed communities. I went, wearing my same blue windbreaker from the day I stood on the roof and watched my panels get stolen. The hearing room was packed. Senators shuffled papers and tapped on tablets while aides whispered behind them. I was nervous at first, but once I started telling the story, the early threats, the removal, the power outage, and the revenge, I found my rhythm. I even got a few laughs when I described Sherry's motion to name the solar array after Craig. HOAs were designed to protect neighborhoods, I said into the microphone, but somewhere along the way, too many of them became little kingdoms. If you give unchecked power to people with no oversight, don't be surprised when they act like tyrants. What happened in my neighborhood wasn't just about solar panels. It was about who gets to decide what's fair, and whether the sun on your roof belongs to you or to a board you didn't vote for. I left the chamber to applause. Within months, a new bill was introduced, the Solar Rights and Homeowner Protection Act. It proposed limits on HOA authority over energy infrastructure, required transparency in board contracts, and established a hotline for whistleblowers. It hadn't passed yet, but the movement had started. Back home, something surreal happened. A documentary crew reached out. They wanted to make a feature about our neighborhood story, a working title like Power Struggle: The Battle for Solar Justice. I agreed on one condition. It wasn't about me. It had to highlight everyone: Marie, Sherry, Dan, Julio, Carmen, the whole community. When they filmed the scene of our neighborhood's new solar field lighting up at night for the first time, it was emotional. Children danced in the glow of the walkway lights. Neighbors clapped and hugged. Sherry raised a glass of lemonade and toasted, "To power we generate and power we reclaim." I saw Carmen at the event. She smiled and said, "You know, if this law passes, you might be responsible for changing how millions of Americans live." I shook my head. "Nah, I just wanted my lights back." She laughed. "Sometimes that's where revolutions begin." But Craig? He wasn't doing so well. A few months into his sentence, a letter from him landed in my mailbox, mailed through a mutual acquaintance. It was handwritten, 3 pages long. I didn't know what to expect. He started with blame. The media twisted things. Then denial. "You don't know how stressful it is managing entitled homeowners." But by the third page, it shifted. Maybe I got carried away. Maybe I thought I was helping. Maybe I didn't want to admit I'd lost control. And then, the sentence that stuck with me. The scariest thing wasn't losing power. It was realizing no one trusted me with it anymore. I folded the letter, tucked it into a drawer, and didn't respond. Sometimes closure isn't about replies. It's about knowing the truth got where it needed to go. We held a community celebration 6 months after Craig's sentencing. We called it Solarfest. Booths lined the community park. Kids painted sunflowers on recycled panels. Food trucks donated portions of their sales to local green initiatives. And right in the center stood a steel plaque at the base of the solar array. In honor of those who stand in the light, even when others try to shut it off. Dan caught me staring at it and nudged my shoulder. "Still think you don't want to run for office?" I grinned. "Not unless I can run on sunshine." We both laughed, and somewhere in the background, music played. A cover of Here Comes the Sun strummed on acoustic guitar. And this time, no one was fined for the noise. 2 years passed, and life in the neighborhood didn't just recover, it flourished. What had started as a nightmare became the blueprint for a revolution. Other neighborhoods across the country began contacting us, people fed up with overreaching HOAs, looking for guidance on how to take back control. We put together a community manual, free to download, called Homeowners United, Reclaiming Power from the Boardroom to the Backyard. It included step-by-step instructions on running for board elections, demanding financial transparency, and navigating local solar rights ordinances. It spread faster than we expected. A small town in Arizona used it to fight a mandatory lawn replacement rule during a drought. A subdivision in Florida used it to reinstate a disabled vet's access ramp after it was removed for not matching the design palette. In California, a community cited our playbook to push through rooftop battery installations after years of board resistance. Apparently, HOA revenge was more than personal. It had become a cause. Sherry eventually stepped down from the board, citing revolution fatigue. But she stayed active in the community, organizing wellness walks and holding meditation sessions in the new solar garden. Dan was still on the board, though he often joked that the most exciting thing this month was approving a lemonade stand. Me? I'd returned to my normal life, or something close to it. I'd gotten a small consulting gig helping new neighborhoods design HOA charters with homeowner protections baked in. I never planned it, but apparently, standing up for your rights could land you in some interesting places. One morning, I was sipping coffee on my porch when a moving van pulled up next door. A young couple got out, 2 kids bouncing excitedly at their feet. They waved at me. "Hi there. You must be the guy from the solar story," I laughed. Guilty as charged. We looked everywhere for a place where we could raise our family without all the crazy HOA rules. Your neighborhood kept coming up. The husband looked around. "It's nice here. Feels free." I nodded. "We've worked hard to keep it that way." He paused, then asked, "So is it true they really cut your power?" "Oh, they did more than that," I said, grinning. "But I made sure they never forgot it." Later that month, I got an invitation in the mail from the state governor's office. A bill signing ceremony. The Solar Rights and Homeowner Protection Act had passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. The governor wanted me there when he signed it into law. The event was held on the state capitol steps. Dozens of advocates and reporters stood under a perfectly blue sky. The governor spoke about energy independence, homeowner freedom, and fighting back against bureaucratic abuse. Then he called me up. I wasn't expecting to say anything. I hadn't prepared a speech. But when I stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd, I couldn't help but speak from the heart. I used to think you had to be somebody special to change things, that you needed money, a title, a platform. But sometimes all it takes is someone getting angry enough to say, "No, you don't get to push me around." What started as a fight over solar panels became something bigger. This law isn't just about energy. It's about fairness, about reminding people that power, real power, should always come from the people. The applause was thunderous. Back at home, we held another neighborhood event, this time a movie night under the stars. We screened the documentary for the first time in public. People brought blankets and lawn chairs. The local news even showed up. The film opened with drone footage of our neighborhood before the solar transformation. Gray roofs, minimal lights, lots of posted warnings. Then it transitioned to scenes of protest, community meetings, the courtroom, the power outage, and eventually to our glowing solar-powered streets. The final shot? Me standing on my roof with the sun behind me, panels gleaming. The credits rolled, and the crowd erupted in applause. I sat there quietly, soaking it in, feeling the weight of it all settle into something peaceful. But just as I thought it was all behind me, I got a call. "Hey," the voice said on the other end. "You don't know me, but I'm from a neighborhood in Texas. Our HOA just started threatening people with liens for having solar panels. They say we're violating their energy alignment strategy." I smirked. "Let me guess," I said. "They hired an outside contractor?" "Yes. You've seen this before?" "Oh, you could say I've lived it." "Can you help us?" I stood, stepped out onto my back porch, and looked up at the sun blazing above my fully restored panels. "Yeah," I said. "I've got a few ideas." These days, they call me the Solar Whisperer in some online circles. I've done webinars, spoken at conventions, and helped hundreds of neighborhoods transition to greener, fairer systems. Some have started calling for full HOA reform on a state level. Others have begun suing their boards in class actions using my case as precedent. Craig? He ended up working for a pest control company after prison. I heard he had to move 3 towns over because no HOA would accept his application. Irony, right? At the end of it all, what mattered most wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming dignity. It was proving that no matter how stacked the deck seems, truth, determination, and a little bit of strategy can turn even the most powerless homeowner into the spark that ignites real change. Because when the HOA cut off my solar power, they thought they were dimming my light. They had no idea it would shine brighter than ever.